This is my last Watches and Wonders video. After 5 days with hundreds of conversations and a monsoon of watches, I think I'm ready for a break, and that's why I'm in my summer home. But before the break, I thought I'd share my list of real positives, because there were quite a few. The best watches, the best innovations from an otherwise underwhelming event. Also, since some of the watches are pretty expensive, where possible, I've got some suggestions on where you can get something similar for much less money. Then, of course, I'll talk a little bit more about my favorite watch of the show, and then stick around till the end where I have my final thought on what I think the industry needs. Nomos released a white dialed version of the World Timer that they released last year. This is the simplest and least extroverted World Timer of the collection, and I can see it doing really, really well as a product. Losing the silver, losing the blue, and going for a simpler look does this already excellent watch a whole lot of justice. There aren't a whole lot of World Timers below this price point, but if you want to, I haven't had it in hand yet, but I will have it in for review. The Baltic new World Timer might be an option, but aesthetically, it's a very different proposition. If you want to go for the aesthetic and you don't want to go Nomos, Junghans is typically a good option. As I spoke about in the last video, the Alpina Star Timer, it's a little pilot's watch, 40 millimeters. It's got beautiful proportions, it's well made, it's filled with details, and it makes for a really compelling option. For the entire show in the main display, this was among one of the cheapest watches at the main event, and it's also one of the best ones as far as I'm concerned. The Tudor Black Bay updates are meaningful despite just being updates, especially the 58. It's got a thinner case at 11.7 millimeters. It's got Metas movement now. It has a Jubilee style bracelet. The design has also been modernized ever so slightly, and the 58 is now less retro styled and just a much more contemporary offering from Tudor. It's a really strong update, and the addition of the Black Bay 58 GMT is also a big plus. I know that the Tudor Royal was also finally updated with better movement, better finishing, changes to the bezel and sort of the way it was polished and cut and crowned and all that kind of stuff. But to me, the Tudor Royal wasn't compelling before, and it isn't now either. As for options instead of the Black Bay 58, I would go Serica 5305 or a Laurier Neptune. Get very similar looks for a significantly low price. IWC, they did something cool, and I'm not talking about the space watch that they made, which I do think was cool too. The thing that's cool is a feature that deserves props, and that's the ProSet feature. Now, for those of you that don't know, a perpetual calendar has typically one fatal flaw. And the flaw is, once you've made certain adjustments to the calendar, you can't turn them back. So if you accidentally, for example, set the year 1 year forward, you are screwed. You can't go back. You either have to take it in for service or wait a full year of not using it for it to realign to the actual date. The ProSet feature is a new mechanism that allows you to set the mechanism backwards and forwards, which reduces risk of mistakes being made massively. Another positive for me from them is the green ceramic with gold accents. And I swear I actually came up with this idea last year. I know I brought it up in the Formex video with their Ceramica Essence, which was a black ceramic with skeletonized dial. But I said I wanted the Springbok, which would be a green ceramic with a gold dial. I also pretty distinctly remember saying last year to some people at IWC they should do this version. Maybe they'd already thought of it, but I'm going to take credit anyway. I don't care. That's a super cool watch. If you want a cheaper version of it that doesn't exist in green, but pressure the people over at Formex to make the Ceramica Essence in green with gold accents, and you will have a phenomenal watch for, like, I'm going to say 1/10 of the price. Well, not 1/10, 1/5 of the price. I am also going to praise Panerai. Not for pricing, because that would be patently insane, and then you might as well just accept that I've given up being honest, but the watches themselves that they released this year. They released a whole lot of Luminors, and in a positive sense, they threw in the towel and said, we are good at big watches. We've been trying to convince people for a long time to buy smaller versions of our watches because that's what people want, and it hasn't worked. So instead, they decided we are going to make some really nice old school big Panerai Luminors, 44mm and 47mm versions. They have added a case finishing that looks rugged. They are old school, they are on point. The dials also really lean into the sandwich dials of the past. They aren't for the slim-wristed and for those who are just against big watches, but it's the most real release from them in a really long time. Bonus to them also, I think they had the coolest display of them all. The entire room was basically one big aquarium. It was like big and water filled. It was like major coolness. If you want something slightly similar at a lower price point, I would say a Fiers Brunswick or potentially a Nevada Grenchen. They have some square dials as well. The Fiers Brunswick Filton is a little bit more of a dressier option, where the Nevada Grenchens are on the more rugged side. Chopard have the XPS Prussian Blue for 13,000-ish Swiss francs. That's a lot of money, but it's a stunning dress watch. If you want to go even more bananas expensive, 23,000 for the LUC 1860, which is an anniversary style edition. The differences are several, but the main ones are the quality and finish of the movements used, plus the 1860 having a far more intricately put together dial. These are just phenomenal little dress watches from a brand that is seriously underrated. If you think the price is bonkers, which it is out of the price range of most regular people, you can get something like the Millésime from Raymond Weil. Here you get a solid watch with the same kind of feel and still a solid movement. You can also go even lower to something like a Baltic, and you lose the movement or anything that resembles anything called a manufacturer or in-house or whatever, but it's still dial-wise a very good representation of this style of watch. Vacheron Constantin overseas, they had several overseas on display. The best one probably being the ultra thin, which was only made in very, very few examples, and no people are going to get a hold of it. I think it's like 96,000 Swiss francs. Absolutely ridiculous. Well, not ridiculous in the sense that, I mean, platinum and Vacheron, but it's expensive. It's not for normal people. It's not for regular people. This is, as I think Andrew McCutcheon said to me, it's going to be unobtainium. What I do more, though, want to focus on is the movement. They've developed a new ultra-thin movement. It took them 7 years to develop it, and I respect when a company puts that effort into improving their products. It's a 2.4mm movement. It's got 80 hours of power reserve. It's finished impeccably, and it also has, for the same reason, a Geneva seal. Moser had a star in the Streamliner pump. For those of you that don't know what Reebok pumps are, ask your dad. He will definitely know. The watches themselves are the familiar Streamliner shape, reimagined in new materials with the pump pusher at the 730 positional, thereabouts. It's fun, it's playful, it's edgy. Moser have a really strong understanding of what works these days. They have an edge to their products that doesn't come across as contrived or forced or corporate. They seem genuine and authentic, and it's refreshing to experience. Then there's the integrated bracelet watch from JLC. Now, in my first video, I called it underwhelming. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I'm a big fan of integrated bracelets. I'm looking into buying a new watch, and I am probably leaning into my next watch being an integrated bracelet watch. But at the same time, I'm tired of integrated bracelet releases. I know that's kind of oxymoronic or hypocritical, but that's just the way I feel. I want these kinds of watches, but I don't want brands mindlessly chasing the trend, and integrated bracelets are still a trend. The second reason I called this watch underwhelming is because most, if not all, integrated bracelets have something that makes them distinctive. So the Nautilus is the porthole, the Royal Oak is the octagonal bezel, IWC has the porthole with the sort of lugs or bolt positions. The Streamliner in its very design is distinctive. Vacheron Constantin have the 222 and the overseas, which is all about the Maltese cross in more or less distinctive versions. For Chapek, it's the dial and the C-link bracelet. The JLC, on the other hand, doesn't have that level of distinctiveness. It's got a teeny tiny bit of flair in the call back to the Dauphine hands in the way the bracelet is made, but otherwise it's not so much. The reason I think it was so underwhelming to me initially was this extreme understatedness. This is, and I still stand by that, an almost bland integrated bracelet design. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've come to the conclusion that that's actually a good thing. It doesn't shout. It doesn't try to say, look at the thing that I do really distinctively. It's just simple. It's restrained and it's extremely elegant. So it doesn't whelm that much. I'm going to pretend that's a word. But I have converted to feeling that its understated nature is a potential strength for some people. If you want something similar in the understated category, I think the Christopher Ward C60 Slim is a pretty decent option in that level of understatedness. Main Manhattan Ultra Slim also has some element of that understatedness. I'm a big fan of Trilobe. They have the 32, which they released last year. It's again a brilliant integrated bracelet watch. I know, totally hypocritical. I'm staying with it. I don't care. I can handle conflict in my mind. That's fine. Their movement is special because of a very Spartan movement and a very Breguet type of aesthetic. The most striking thing about their movement is the amount of nothingness it has, the empty space. Where other brands have bridges and doodads everywhere, this is a much cleaner and simpler design. It's a truly beautiful movement, and the fact that it is allowed to breathe just brings it to another level compared to a whole lot of other movements. The second thing I like about the Trilobe 32 is the dial. I just like this interpretation of how you tell time. Also, because there are no hands, the crystal actually lies almost entirely on top of the dial. So the dial is really, really close to you when you look at it, and it gives quite a special experience. They made this year a rose gold version with a green rubber strap and green dial, and that thing is freaking awesome. And then my favorite watch of the year, no big surprise, yet another integrated bracelet, the Parmigiani Tonda Chronograph Mysterious. I'm going to call out the alternative straight away. Venetianico Arsenale for about $1,000-ish. That's aesthetics wise as close as you're going to get to the Parmigiani for a much lower price. But the Tonda, oh my word, the Tonda. This is a triple flyback chronograph. I loved it when I saw it on Tuesday. I loved it when I saw it looking over the shoulder of someone who was allowed to handle it. But on Thursday, I met with the CEO of Parmigiani, Guido, who walked me through his vision of this watch. And I don't know what's higher than love, but that's what I felt. I sat with the guy and he walked me through how he saw clothing, style, the role of the suit, and how our attitudes towards clothing have changed over the centuries, and how he saw how these watches should reflect the history of how clothing developed and where clothing has moved. He spoke about how he, through engineering, wanted to combine form and function into a simple, perfect union. And just to take the bracelet, the Parmigiani bracelet is a phenomenal fit, and it is right now the best bracelet out there. It doesn't have a micro adjust because, as Guido told me, he wants a micro adjust, but it has to be functional and also look beautiful. And so far, he said, and I completely agree with him, the micro adjust mechanisms that are out there today are not beautiful. They are only functional. He will not do a micro adjustment mechanism until he can meld the functional and the aesthetic. I caught myself chuckling with joy being allowed to handle that mechanism. This is a watch where the flyback chronograph is hidden when you don't need it, and it's all run by a single pusher. That mechanism is absolutely fabulous. And I love the fact that Guido doesn't care about hype. He doesn't care about status. He just communicated a desire to make the best damned aesthetic piece of engineering he could. Finally, I said in my video on Tuesday that I felt Watches and Wonders this year was a disappointment. And overall, I do stand by that. It's a really polished event. And you're probably going to argue, well, what do you expect? It's the biggest event of the year. But this is where I remember an employer I once worked with, where I was there, and at some point they decided they want to take all the employees of the company, about 200 people, for a weekend trip of basically getting drunk. The first year we did that, we were sleeping in bunk beds. The music was an iPhone and a boombox that we bought in a supermarket. And the CEO, who said to us, you have to work hard and then play hard, which means you show up on time the next morning, he didn't show up on time the next morning because he was busy throwing up in the bathroom. It was one of the best trips I've ever been on with a company. The year after that, we did it again, but we upgraded everything. Better hotel, better speakers, an actual DJ, still somebody you kind of find on, the yellow pages kind of thing. And the CEO, he was sober when he did his speech. That was also a brilliant trip. And this kind of cycle went on for a couple of years where they refined the concept, they improved on the concept. But at some point, there was this trip, and I remember it. I remember thinking, it's gotten too big, too polished, too professional. So the CEO was wearing a suit. He had a teleprompter. The music was a famous band. The hotel was essentially a 6-star hotel. There were speeches, there were dances, there was entertainment. It was, in every sense, better than the first time. It was in every sense bigger, more professional, just perfect in every way. But it felt impersonal, it felt overproduced, and it felt inauthentic. In all of the pomp and circumstance that had been put into that show to make it professional, it lost something. That's the feeling I had with Watches and Wonders. An ultra professional, ultra streamlined trade show where everything just works. You've got your 30-minute meetings, you've got your schedule, you've got your organization, everything is perfect. Tuck, 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 tuck. It just runs seamlessly like clockwork. And it's not the fault of the people. I'm not anti this industry in any way. I love watches and I have huge respect for all the people working in this industry. Every single person I met at the brands was friendly and helpful and professional. They have worked their backsides off to put together a good show. And I think they should be proud. I applaud them. I really, really do. But the event as a whole lacked soul. It felt, on the whole, like the corporate machine that it is. The things that are memorable to me, apart from, of course, the great watches, were the things that had heart. They were all the independents that were not at the main show. I was at the side shows, but not enough. I did not have the best time management in the world this time around, and next year I'm going to do much more there. But that's where there was passion. It was also things like the CEO of Chapek standing early Tuesday morning, preparing his display together with his team, clearly not having their shit together, but doing everything they could to get it set up on time as a team. It was sitting with a product manager from a brand who proudly told about his role in developing a model that was a big risk, but ended up being sold out in almost minutes. He took a chance in pitching a crazy idea. Someone said yes, and then it turned out to be a success. And then finally, it was a guy like Guido, who just demonstrated a passion for his vision and his product that almost, had me pull out my credit card on the spot for a 37,000 Swiss franc watch. And he wasn't selling me anything. He just wanted to tell me about his journey to make the best damned timepiece he could. A lot of brands are just chasing this generic rich person who wants some bling, and eventually I do think it's going to kill the industry. This industry needs less boardroom decisions, less PowerPoints, less demographic analyses, and less superficiality. It needs authenticity. It needs more Guidos. Thank you to all of you fans that were down there that came up and said hi to me and shook my hand. I'm still uncomfortable when you do it, but I am really appreciative of the support you guys give me. Thanks a ton. like, subscribe. Cheers.